In this episode, we're going to take a look at Microsoft Purview, the compliance center that comes with Microsoft 365. And we're going to do a deep dive of its most important features. So if you're ready to learn, you better stay tuned. Greetings YouTubers, Andy here, great to see you. This week I'm going to take a look at Microsoft Purview, the compliance center that seems to grow and grow in Microsoft 365. So I thought I'm going to go a little bit deeper with some of the topics and really kind of focus on what I think are some of the cool and new features that you definitely need to know. Now, if you've not subscribed to the channel, we love subscribers, so bump that subscribe button, ring the bell, and you won't miss out on the good stuff in the future. And as you know, I welcome your comments, your questions about this, and in fact all of my other sessions as well. So just get those questions down below and I'll do my absolute best for you. Now, I've had a big request on, Andy, how do I create my videos? Well, I'm going to do a video on that and give you like a little behind the scenes tour on how I produce my videos, what software I use. So watch out for that. That's coming up soon. And if you're interested in that, then please do let me know. So without any further ado, I think it's about time we jump in to Microsoft Purview and check out some of these demos. Enjoy. So let's take a journey into Microsoft Purview. So first up, here I am in Microsoft 365, and I'm going to go into the Admin Center. I'm just going to expand the menu, and I'm going to go into Compliance. Now, formerly known as the Microsoft 365 Compliance Admin Center, Microsoft have been keen to brand everything. Now, anything to do with security has come under its Defender brand. You've got Microsoft Purview, which of course is the compliance tools. And ultimately, we're now seeing Microsoft Priva. So Microsoft Priva is all the privacy management, which I'm going to cover in a separate video. Also, not to confuse you any further, but if also in Azure Active Directory is currently in the process of rebranding, and it's becoming the new Microsoft Entra Admin Center. So Microsoft Entra, Defender, Priva rather, and Purview. I know it's all a bit confusing, isn't it? Okay, so here I am then in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, and I'm going into Microsoft Purview here. Now, Microsoft Purview, as you can see here, we have a number of different cards. And you can, of course, move these cards around. You can also customize the cards. So you can really kind of customize the compliance center to exactly how you want it. All right. Now, just before we go into the various tools, which I'm going to timestamp, by the way, so if you want to flip back and forth and look at the different sections, then you're going to be able to do that in this video. So first up then, one of the first places that I want to go is one of the really important places, which is settings. What we're starting to see now is a lot more settings, and also some new features are starting to come in here. So for example, device onboarding. So you can turn on devices. So if you can either turn off or turn on, and you can also monitor both Windows and also Mac OS options as well. Now, of course, we're talking about compliance, and in order to manage compliance on your machines, you're going to need to download a little agent here. Now, there are various scripts, so typically Mac OS and Windows 10, and again, there's various scripts here that you can use. Now, if you're using on-premises technologies, then you can use things like group policy and Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Management, or you can, of course, deploy it through Intune or virtual desktop solutions. But either way, there's a script here that can help you onboard as well as offboard your devices here. Okay, what else have we got? Co-authoring. This is a new feature that we've now got. So things like co-authoring with sensitive files. So if you're using sensitivity labels, they need to be enabled on OneDrive and SharePoint. Now, again, if it's already been done, then it's simple. But if not, then there are a few prerequisites here that you just need to switch on. Basically, it's just a few PowerShell scripts that you need to run. All right. Now, so that's that. And what that does is that will allow you to do co-authoring. So if you're working with teams, different team members can amend the sensitivity labels. Compliance Manager. So here we have Compliance Manager. And one of the things you're going to want to switch on, and in fact leave it switched on, is the automatic testing for compliance testing for improvement actions. You can switch it off, but to be honest, I think it's actually pretty good. One important thing here, though, is if you're testing and you're testing individual users, just to let you know, it does keep a history of those. But one of the things that you can do is you can go in and you can delete the history in relation to compliance here. So for privacy and security reasons, it's something that you might want to do. This is another new feature. It's called the DLP Rule Builder. Again, I showed that recently in a previous video, by the way. If you're in hybrid and you're using rights management services, Active Directory rights management services, and or the file classification service, one of the things that you can do is you can install this protection scanner on a local machine. You can set a couple of nodes up. And what this does is it monitors all the sensitivity labels that you might be using on premises. So the idea being that when you eventually migrate the content through to 365, those labels will automatically come into information protection. Really, really useful feature that. So that's the new information protection scanner. Like I said, in the settings page, really important that you understand that. Now, Compliance Manager is really super important. Many of us, of course, have dedicated compliance people within our company. Just to mention that if you are interested in compliance, one of the first things that you're going to need to do is you're going to need to set permissions. So in Microsoft Purview here, you can see that not only do you have to be an Azure admin, a Microsoft 365 admin, of which of course we have those roles here, but again, you also need to have Purview admin roles. Particularly important if you plan to do things like eDiscovery, privacy management, insider risk management, and so on. So you might find yourself being a global admin, but not having these rights. So kicking off in Compliance Manager then, I'm sure you're familiar with Secure Score, but we also have the capability to do Compliance Score here. And your Compliance Score is comprised of your points as well as Microsoft. Remember that within the cloud, it's a shared responsibility model. So Microsoft do their bit, but you also have to do your bit in terms of security and compliance settings and so on. So again, here we can see you get like a nice overall view and how many points that you've got and how many could be achieved. Other things that we've got here, if you're currently in trial, and then of course you've got your improvement actions that you can actually go here as well. So we have a number of improvement options. So things like, do you want to enable self-service password reset? How to implement it? It walks you straight through the whole thing. It gives you a nice step-by-step guide. And again, there's a launch now, so you can actually go ahead and do it. This is really nice, by the way, that it also integrates into the Microsoft 365 Learn portal. So learn.microsoft.com and also docs.microsoft.com. So if you want to know, okay, I understand, Andy, how it works, but can I see it? How do I implement it? These are really, really useful for you. Okay, so definitely take a look at the Compliance Manager here. Now, so that's the improvement actions. Microsoft also provides you with a bunch of solutions. And to be honest, at the moment, these are just kind of Microsoft solutions. But if I just flip back over and go into the security portal in Microsoft 365, which of course is Defender, so the Microsoft Defender for Microsoft 365, what we're also seeing here now is the new partner catalog. And you can see that it's not just including, so security, obviously the technologies, but also the consulting services. So I have a feeling that pretty soon you're going to start seeing that in Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Purview in here. So the next thing that we've got is assessments. Now, again, one of the important aspects of compliance is proving that you're compliant with a particular standard. And here in the assessment templates, we literally have hundreds of different templates. Now, some of these are premium templates that you need to pay for, and they tend to be a little bit more localized, to be honest. Whereas the more kind of standard ones, they tend to be free. Okay, so the idea is that you can open an assessment. So you can see here, I've got a couple here. I can open the assessment and it fully integrates into, for example, compliance score. And it looks very similar. So again, you get a similar details about it, about the assessment itself. And also it shows you what controls. So in order to be compliant, it's showing you all the different controls, and it shows you where you are as well, how far your progress is. Likewise, it also integrates into those controls. So you can see these are the various controls. Okay, Andy, if I want to implement this, I click into that control, and you can see it gives me the improvement actions as well as the Microsoft actions, and I can then go into these one at a time. And again, it's very similar to what I've just shown you. So it tells you exactly how to implement it and how it works. So again, the controls are super useful. Okay, so that's how you can do assessments in 365. Once the assessment is done, you can then print that off, hand it to the assessor, and you're pretty much good to go. So you've got the templates here. You've also got alerts. So again, with any of those alerts, you can set your own alert policies here. So for example, reminders how to do things, and for testing, so you can set deadlines. So when it's time, an alert will take place and you can then take action on that. So moving on then, we have this called data classification. So data classification actually works in conjunction with a number of the other technologies, including information protection, data loss prevention policies, and things like insider risk management. And you can basically add in your own categories. So for example, here we have sensitive information types. And sensitive information types, things like credit card numbers, social security. So for example, this week I'm in Norway, and if there was something missing from this list, then I can go in here and I can create my own sensitive information type. Likewise, you can also create your own trainable classifiers. So these are classifiers that tools like insider risk management would use. So if you're looking for things like bad language within emails and things like that, then trainable classifiers can be really useful. So the Content Explorer shows me where all of my sensitive information is and how much sensitive information. And as I click on each of these, for example, credit card numbers or debit card numbers, it shows you exactly where those are in the big picture. So you can see that here in OneDrive, I've got 41 occurrences, and I can then drill into that. Here you can also see the Activity Explorer, which gives me a nice overview of recent activity, where and how data loss labels, for example, were applied. So that can be really useful. So there we go. That's data classification. Now, one of the cool things that Purview brings is the ability to connect to almost unlimited data sources. So you can see here, and this is something that's becoming really increasingly important. So for example, I've mentioned previously that Azure Active Directory can now connect to HR systems. So here you can pretty much connect to hundreds and hundreds of different data sources. So things like if you're a healthcare provider, if you're HR, different SQL databases, phone suppliers, literally any type of connectors here you can connect to. Again, just be aware that connectivity to some of these services does bring potential initial charges, so watch out for that. We also have alerts here. So if there are any compliance alerts, now compliance alerts can be generated from the Microsoft Defender products, as well as things like, in this case, eDiscovery, if there's an eDiscovery alert, data loss prevention policy. And as you can see, some of these they're labeled either high, medium, or low risk. So just like most alerts in all things Microsoft 365, you can come in here, you can have a look at the alert. What's the alert about? I can notify a particular user. So if it's affecting a particular user, I can do that. I can choose to resolve it. Or you might say, yeah, I'm okay. I want to suppress the alert just now. So up next we have reports. So in here you can see that alerts will also generate reports as well. So for example, how many labels were applied, which classification labels, what were your top 5 labels, and you can see this will fill in shortly. Things like who are the heaviest users of compliance within your organization. Again, this is just a demo environment here, but hopefully you can see I can easily click into these and I can then view those reports, and more importantly, I can then export that content out there. So that's really nice. Now we go into policies. To be honest, a lot of these policies can actually be found in the other tools. Now, I'm actually thinking that the policies menu will probably end up in something like the settings menu that I showed you earlier, because most of these tools can actually be found in these other products here. And I think these are kind of the older interfaces that we had. In the trials page here, this is where you can try out other tools in respect to things like Microsoft Purview. So there are additional trials that you can set up here. All right. So there's, again, some new and enhanced features there. So the app governance feature, this is just a shortcut. And it's an extension of Cloud App Security, or Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. If I click onto that, it'll just take me into the Defender for Cloud Apps portal. I'm not going to cover that in this session, but I will cover that in a future session. The next thing then is auditing. So auditing here is awesome, by the way. Such a powerful feature. So you've got a couple of really important things here. Depending on your business and the type of business, you may have compliance policies that require you to set a retention policy. So here you can actually create a retention policy and essentially how long you're going to keep your audit logs for. So just to show you now, in the past, it used to be 90 days. Now you can actually keep these logs for up to 10 years, which is really useful. So here you can basically search time frames and dates for all kinds of activities, and these are all categorized. So things like who's accessing files, who's deleting files, and then you can scroll down. You've got folder activities, you've got device activities, sharing and access requests, synchronization activities. What else have we got? Then we've got each of the products. You've got things like SharePoint, who's accessing mailboxes, Microsoft Teams. So who's managing administrator accounts, deleting, creating users. The granularity here is just absolutely fearsome. So definitely take a look at this. Super powerful auditing features. And again, a major function of things like compliance and also potentially digital forensics as well. Now, the idea of search is that I can go in, I can run a search By the way, I would need to give myself enterprise search capabilities to be able to do this, but it allows you to search through multiple users' mailboxes and so on. What you can also do is you can also, I've got nothing here because this is just a demo, but I can essentially, if there were any results, the key thing to note here is you can actually see the results. You can actually read the emails, read the messages, and so on. Now, I'm often asked, Andy, what's the difference between search and the likes of eDiscovery? So the key thing to remember about eDiscovery, and I'm going to do a session on eDiscovery in the not too distant future. I'll give you a full demo of that. But the key difference between this and eDiscovery is that in eDiscovery, you can place a user account on legal hold. And what that does is it prevents the user from, once she's on legal hold, you can't empty your recycle bin. So everything continues to flow, but nothing can be emptied from the recycle bin. So if a user is potentially malicious, I can now perform a search through Deborah's mailbox, through her Teams folder, through her content, and I can then export that out and look at that for forensic reasons. Two versions of eDiscovery. One is standard. This is something that you might want to use internally for your organization. Whereas premium eDiscovery, again, at the moment, it's included in the subscription, but I have a feeling that this may soon go to an additional cost. So the key difference here is that you can actually open a case and you can share it with multiple participants. So, for example, law enforcement and various lawyers and solicitors and so on. Okay, so now we come to what I think are some of the most important tools. And again, in the past, I have done dedicated sessions on those. But let's take a look then at what I think is one of the most important ones, and this is data lifecycle management. So data lifecycle management, particularly important for things like retention policies. So retention, I'm often asked, Andy, what's the difference between retention and backup? Backup is for operational and disaster recovery features, whereas retention is for compliance and legal reasons that we need to back up our data or retain our data for a specific amount of time. So in essence, I'm going to come in here to retention policies, and I'm going to create a new retention policy. Okay, so I'm going to call this my London policy. So I'm just going to click in here. So this is my London policy. You can put in a little description in there. I'll just click on next. And who is this relating to? Is it an adaptive scope? So this is a dynamic scope. So for example, anyone in the sales group, all right? Or I'll come back and I'll show you that adaptive scope in a second. Or it can be a static scope. So again, I can now go in and choose the specific recipients. So for example, in email here, I might come in here and I might say, okay, I want to bring in, let's say, the legal and the finance teams. So this archiving policy is just for those particular teams. So what do we want to do? Do we want to retain items for a specific period of time? So again, for tax reasons, you might want to, keep tax records for 7 years. Again, I can go into custom and I can say, hey, I'm going to keep this for 1 year here. So do you want the retention period to be based on when the item was created or when it was last modified? Easiest way to remember this is if today is the 1st of December 2022, it will stay till December 2023. What will happen on the 1st of December 2023 is the document will go into a recycle bin. So if I come into SharePoint here, so I'm going to come into my London IT support here. I'm going to go into that website and I'm going to go into my recycle bin. Now, of course, this is the first stage recycle bin where all your kind of junk goes. But anything that goes in here is basically stored for 30 days. Beyond that, it goes into a second stage recycle bin. And the second stage recycle bin, it stores it here for a further 63 days. So that's a total of 93 days. So bearing in mind that when you working out these dates, so if it's the 1st of December today, it will be retained from when the item was created to the 1st of December 2023, and at the end of the retention period, that will delete it into the first stage recycle bin for 30 days, and then the second stage recycle bin for a further 63 days. You can also say do nothing. So what that means is it takes the retention label off, and at the end of that period, it's the user who can then decide to go ahead and delete it. You can also retain the item forever. Now, this is really important because this essentially is placing the item on legal hold. And only delete the item when it reaches a certain age. So I could just say, above all else, keep it for a year. At the end of that, delete it. All right. So you have a number of options here. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to say, yeah, that's my policy. And I'm going to go ahead and submit that. And you can now see that I've gone and created my retention policy. But incredibly powerful feature and super, super useful. All right. Just to mention the adaptive scope, by the way, I can go into an adaptive scope. Here's one that I made earlier. And all the scope is, in fact, let me just edit this. All this is I can say, okay, is it for a specific set of users? Is it for a specific SharePoint site or a Microsoft 365 group, aka Teams? So I've just said here, okay, the query is if the group name or display name equals Sterling Managers, there we go. So anybody who's got an attribute of Sterling Managers in their user account will automatically be picked up by that adaptive scope. So super powerful, and that, gentlemen and ladies, is data lifecycle management. So the next tool then I want to just take a quick look at is information protection. Super important, and this is dealing with classification and labels. So I'm going to click into labels here, and of course you might want to create a label. I'm going to call this label London Secret. Okay, so I'm going to call it London Secret. Again, you can copy that and you can change the display name and also the text that users will see. Just a couple of things here. Label scopes by default, it looks to an item, so documents, emails, and so on, and also schematized data. As I mentioned earlier, the group, if you want to assign it to groups and sites, click on the little link here. And again, it's a step-by-step guide. If you just scroll right down, you can see that there are a number of, just come down here, there's a number of PowerShell features here. You just copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste into PowerShell. You would need to then log off and log back in again, and this option would then be active. So do I want to encrypt or mark the items? I'm going to click both. And again, I can, do I want to configure some encryption settings? So I don't want to set an expiry date on the content, and I don't want to allow, you can choose things like, do you want to provide offline access and so on. So I can assign permissions. So I'm going to assign it for users and groups within my organization. I can choose the permission, and you've got different permission levels. So for example, co-owner, co-author, reviewer, viewer, and also you can do a custom setting. And as you notice, each of the different roles have different sets of permissions. Okay. For the purpose of this demo, I'll keep it as co-author. and I'll click Save. All right. So I'm going to click Next. Do I want to mark it? Yeah. So I can add a little watermark. I can add a header to it. I can customize this. So I'll say London Confidential. You can change the font size, of course, and I can also change the color scheme. And there we go. It takes a second or two. Okay, so now auto labeling for files and emails. Now, if you're using data loss prevention policies, essentially what this is doing is this is adding a data loss prevention policy onto the end of it. So for example, this is how a data loss prevention policy works. So I can basically put in a condition, so content that meets these conditions. So I could say a sensitive information type. So if I scroll down here, there are lots of different sensitive information types. All right, literally hundreds of them. So for example, here, I might want to say a bank account number, a driver's license number, a UK passport number, and so on. You see what I mean? So there's things like credit card numbers, bank account numbers, social security numbers, all really, really important sensitive information. And you can go in and you can add those in. All right. So those are the conditions. And then when content matches the condition, because we're using this label now, it will automatically apply the label. And you can also assign a little message as well to the user. Again, groups and sites is grayed out because I've not switched on that PowerShell commandlet. And again, you can also do auto labeling for schematized or data bases as well. So there we go. I've now finished that. I'm now going to assign that, and that's an automatic label. And you can also choose to assign the labels manually as well. So users can go in, of course, and they can also assign those labels manually. Okay, so the label was created. Do I want to apply it now to sensitive content? Do I want to publish the label to users? Or don't create a policy yet? Now, I'm going to, for the purpose of this demo, I'm not going to create a policy. I'm just going to create the label. And the reason for that is because if you publish the label and you've got 50 labels, you could potentially end up with 50 policies. Where you, if you've created a label, or a policy rather, a policy contains multiple labels. So at this point, I can now go in and edit that policy. I can click on edit here, and of course I can now scroll down, and there's my London secret label that I've just created, and I can now simply add it to an existing policy. So that does save an awful lot of time, folks. Okay. So at the moment, this policy is being assigned to all users and groups. And again, users can provide a justification. This is if you're using different layers of labeling. So for example, here, you can choose a default label. So for the purpose of this demo, users, they don't, it's not got a preset label on there. So if you want to force users to use a label or set a default label, then you can click on those here, as well as emails and also Power BI content. So we name our policy, it's already created, and we just update the policy by clicking on Submit. So that any new labels that you apply there is a little bit of a time delay, but needless to say, what happens is when the user goes in, opens up a Word document, typically either online or the offline products here, you will see here we've got a little sensitivity label, and check it out. You can see that you've got various sensitivity labels here. Now this particular client hasn't updated yet, but I give it a few minutes and eventually it would update. So that's how you can create labels, information protection, and you can also assign that to your applications using Microsoft Information Protection. Now, one of the most important aspects of security and compliance is the topic of data loss prevention, or as I prefer to call it, data leakage prevention. So what I'm going to come and do is I'm going to come in here to policies and I'm going to create a new policy. So creating of these policies uses templates, and these policies are typically financial, medical and health, privacy, and you've also got custom ones as well. We also have a number of enhanced policies, and these tend to be more localized. So for example, within the US, you might have different states with different requirements and so on. For the purpose of this demo, let's keep it simple. I'm going to go to privacy here. And I'm going to scroll down. Let's see what we've got. I've got, let's say, personally identifiable UK information. So I'm in the UK. I can choose this particular template. So if I click on next, you can see it fills the details in. I can then say, okay, how do I want to fill this in? So we can either choose all, but you can see the key thing about this is it's looking in email, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, and if you've got any on-premises repositories, it will also add those as well. Now, for the purpose of this demo, I don't have any devices that I'm using with Intune or anything, so I'm just going to leave that off at the moment. So I click next, and you can see that this is what it's looking for. So a national insurance or social security number, plus a US or UK passport number. Now, you can also add in additional rules as well if you want to. So you can actually add in additional features here as well. So one of the things you might want to do here is you've got a little pencil here, and this will edit this. And I can scroll down and you can see that you've got a series of different information types. Again, I can add in various information types as well if I want to. You can also put in exceptions, and you can see here, okay, restrict access or encrypt the content. Do you want to block it for everyone, or typically you would really do this for outside of your organization? Do you want to enable user notifications, monitoring endpoint devices and things like that? Who am I going to notify? So who shared the file, the owner of the file, and so on. You can also set up what we call policy tips as well. Now, user overrides, if I leave this completely blank, if let's say you were monitoring a credit card number and it came up, or a social security number, then it would be in an email, it might be in a spreadsheet, and so on. So what would happen is it would just say to you, I'm sorry, you're trying to send that outside of the organization. The corporate policy is no, you're not allowed to send that out. The other thing that you can also do is if you click on this, allow overrides. So what we're doing here is you're saying, okay, we're strict on it, but we'll allow you to override it for business reasons, but you need to provide a reason for it, okay? And if it's a false positive, you can automatically override it. So you can allow an override, so I can send you an email, it's got a credit card number in it, and this will pop up with a tooltip at the top, and it will say, you know, this looks like a credit card number. Are you really sure you want to do that? So remember, if it's off, okay, it doesn't allow overrides. It would just basically say, no, you're not allowed to send that. Whereas if I click that on and say, yes, I'm going to allow overrides, but you have to put in a reason for it. So it's definitely worth spending a little bit of time on this to really think about what it is you're trying to accomplish. So then you've got incident reports, so you can set up incident reports as well. You can set up alerts. How often do you want alerts sent out? Other things, do you want to use incident reports by email? What do you want to include in the incident report? How much detail do you want to provide? And so on. So now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and going to click next. And do you want to test it? Do you want to turn it on or keep it off? It's probably a good idea to test the policy first, all right? Because if you made any mistakes or you've made it too harsh, it might be unpopular. So it's a good idea just to test it out first. So I've gone ahead, I've created my policy, and I'm now going to go ahead and submit that. All right. Now, if it does take an alert, then the alert will hit here. If you've got any endpoint protection on here, you can set the endpoint settings for things like devices, and you can put in file paths and exclusions and things like that. And up here, you'll also get an activity explorer as well. So it just gives you like a log, very similar to the tool that we looked at earlier, you'll remember, in the data classification screen. So there you have it, Microsoft Purview, or AKA the Compliance Center, which comes part of Microsoft 365. I really hope you enjoyed it and that you got a lot out of that. I'm often asked, Andy, which Microsoft course does this relate to? This was definitely the MS-500 security course. You do a lot of compliance in there. So if you're studying for those exams, then this would definitely help you. All right, so that's it for this week. Questions, comments, feedback, get it down below. And if you've not subscribed, please bump that subscribe button, ring the bell, and come and join our great community. You take care, and thanks so much for joining me. I'm Andy Malone. I'll see you next time. Cheers. Hey, thanks so much for dropping by today. Here's a couple of videos that you may enjoy, and while you're here, go ahead, click on the subscribe button and you won't miss out.